Happy Thursday, everybody. Noah Hiles and Andrew Destin here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, getting you ready for another exciting weekend of college football. We will be previewing Penn State. We will be previewing Pitt. And as always, when I'm involved, we're going to be talking a little sports betting. I hear Andrew likes to do that as well. Andrew, this is the first time we've met. No company get-togethers. You're on the other side of the state. It's good to meet you. Good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. No, it's definitely when you're out here located in State College. A lot of people say there's some benefits that you're in between Pittsburgh, in between Philadelphia. You can get to the cities, but I'm a little far away. So nice to meet you here finally, face to face, a little bit over the internet here. But we'll make do with it. And excited to talk some college football for sure, because Penn State and Pitt definitely have some exciting starts to the season for sure.
Yeah, without question. And I'm sure this will be the first of many appearances on this show as long as, the Post-Gazette decides to keep us both around. I'm sure you have no issue. Me, on the other hand, every day I wake up, I'm just excited to still be here. Nonetheless, we'll get started. We'll start off with your game because the team you cover is a little lower ranked than mine. Number 22 in the country is Penn State. They moved in the top 25 poll at the beginning of this week on Sunday at 2 o'clock when the new poll came out. Penn State with 2 wins to start the season over Purdue and Ohio University, and they have their biggest game of the season so far this Saturday on the road at Auburn, an SEC program, a great game last year when these two teams faced off. And Andrew, there's a lot to talk about with these Nittany Lions, but we're going to start off by talking about the new faces on this team, and especially on offense. There's obviously a quarterback everyone wanted to see coming in here, and so far he's given a lot of stuff to like, but he's not been the best freshman so far, I don't think. Give us a little insight on these 2, 3, maybe even more young whippersnappers, as us old folk like me like to call them.
Yeah, on the offensive side, you hit the nail on the head right that one, no. I mean, when you talk about the offensive guys, it's Nicholas Singleton, the running back, 5-star out of the Reading, Pennsylvania area. He has been electric so far. And in the Purdue game, the stats didn't necessarily reflect it. He got caught from behind just before the opportunity to break a few runs. But against Ohio, I understand it's Ohio, but he went off for some big runs there. 3 runs of at least 40 yards. All 3 of those, one of them would have tied for the longest run of the season last year for Penn State. 2 of them went for touchdowns. His ability to bounce it to the outside on the edge. It's the speed that Penn State hasn't seen at the running back spot in a number of years. People talk about guys like Saquon Barkley and what he's done at the NFL level and what he did back in college. Since then, Miles Sanders did a good job for a season and change with Penn State, but it's kind of been a rotating cast and trying out a lot of different faces, and nobody has really stuck for the Nittany Lions. Now it looks like Singleton, he didn't start that game, but when you look at the traits he has, the ability to bounce it outside, his ability to hit the hole quickly, but also demonstrate patience. He's not just a straight line runner who moves fast. Nicholas Singleton has really stood out so far in these first 2 games, especially with his performance being the first 100-yard rusher for Penn State in over a year. I mean, the last time they had that was in the COVID season in 2020, so definitely stood out in that regard. But Drew Aller, I mean, you can't talk about the freshman without talking about the quarterback out of Ohio. A 5-star in his own right, just like Singleton. The abilities he showed with the deep ball, but also with finesse routes. There was one slant pass over the middle where he found a receiver. It was a roughing the passer call against Ohio, but his ability to zip it in there, a tight little gap, it's the ability to mix it up. And that was a question mark with Aller back in the spring game where he, had some flaws, where he threw a couple of interceptions, didn't necessarily show that maturity yet, but now you go into the fall, he's got that summer of practices under his belt, has learned under Sean Clifford, the 6-year quarterback who seems like he's never leaving State College, but have to believe at some point he heads out. But Drew Aller, the abilities he's shown on the deep ball, had a beautiful 32-yard pass to Amari Evans for a touchdown, to the tight end out of North Allegheny High, Khalil Dinkins, caught him for a 28-yarder. The deep pass, as well as the intermediate throws and the short slants, seems like Aller's got it all. And that was a question mark back in the spring, and we'll see when he gets that significant game action again, if it comes against Auburn or if it comes a little bit later in the year. But regardless, I mean, the abilities he's showing throwing the football, complementing that with what Singleton can do running it, Penn State fans got a lot to be excited about for the next few years and maybe even for this season. Who knows?
They got a lot to be excited about for Saturday. I mean, you talked about the young guys. This is their first real test going on the road down south to Auburn. Did I read they're not even flying down there? They're making the long trip. They're staying like an hour outside, maybe even at a different time zone. All drastic measures are being taken when you're playing in the SEC. Andrew, give me a little insight on, everything that's going into this trip and what are some keys that Penn State needs to have success on in order to win.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the itinerary itself. I mean, Penn State usually likes to go out at least a day before the game. I mean, tomorrow's Thursday. They might be heading out tomorrow, might be early in the morning Friday, but either way, it sounds like the airport, Montgomery Airport, they don't have a landing strip that's big enough to accommodate for Penn State's chartered plane, whatever it would end up being. So how they're going to get there remains to be seen. What time they're going to stay in. I know, different reporters staying in places like Columbus, Georgia. They're on the border town. So we'll see. That's definitely going to be something that's worth noting. But the weather itself is one that I think is really interesting. And I know they've been doing a little bit of it this week as well as back in the summer, was practicing in an indoor environment at Haluba Hall, the practice facility at Penn State, closing off the windows, closing off the doors, turning up the heat, because it's going to probably be about 87 degrees with some humidity at game time. And it's going to be humidity in the 50s, nothing crazy, but for the SEC, they might think that's an okay average day. For Penn State people, that's a little bit different. That's not 72 with humidity. That's a little bit different. So for Penn State, I know they're definitely taking their measures. That's going to be with the huge fog machines on the sidelines. And Coach Manny Diaz, the new defensive coordinator, he got 36 guys in on defense last game against Ohio, had over 20 in on defense against Purdue. Got to believe they're going to similarly be doing a lot of rotations with that heat. Nobody's going to be doing too many reps consecutively, especially on that D line, constantly changing guys at defensive tackle, defensive end to try and keep people fresh. So it'll be changing a lot for sure. That'll be something that'll be worth noting. And for Penn State, it's adjusting those kind of factors, but also preparing for an SEC environment. And you had one player earlier today for Penn State who made the comment that playing at Auburn, he is from that area. Harrison Wallace III. He's from Montgomery, Alabama, had grown up an Alabama fan, but went to Auburn games and said that games at Auburn are like playing at Ohio State. It's like the horseshoe. You compare the environment to that. So Penn State's had these type of environments before, but playing on the road, playing in SEC country, this is going to be a challenge. And in addition to just playing the team itself, there's a lot of extra factors that are going to go into this.
And I guess my final question here as we wrap up the Penn State preview, a part of this show, is what does a win at Auburn do for Penn State, in your opinion? I mean, just to start off 2-0, and a win over Purdue's all right. It's a Big Ten school, but I mean, they're not partying in the streets at Happy Valley, or maybe not partying as hard as they would for a bigger win. And they're definitely not celebrating anything over Ohio. So what does a win over Auburn do? Is this something that they're going to be able to point back later in the season and brag about, or is this just something that that allows for them to build a little bit of momentum as they head into conference play?
Well, I think you bring up a great point, because you look at last season, Penn State was kind of in a similar spot, right? Road win against the Big Ten West team in Wisconsin, which I think, unquestionably, that's viewed in a different degree than Purdue. But that Purdue game was still hard fought, a big win for them. The Auburn game, though, what that sets you up for is going into the Central Michigan game, sitting 3-0. Got to believe that's a win, or at least if you're Penn State and you're doing your preseason calendar predictions, you say Central Michigan win, and you think home matchup against Northwestern, that should be a win too. Then you go into a bye weekend, and then you head to the Big House. You play Michigan on the road. So if Penn State is able to come out of this one with a win, you're in the driver's seat at 3-0, looking at two very winnable home games. Could be 5-0 going into a matchup with Michigan. It could be the battle of undefeated teams in Ann Arbor, and that's some really exciting stuff. Looking at that one. So what it does for Penn State probably gets you into the top. I mean, you got to think it's top 20, probably top 15. You're knocking on the door of that top 10 for sure. And they've been there before. I mean, that's a really similar spot to where the Nittany Lions were last year. They were 5-0, went into the Iowa game, lost that one. But if they had won that, you'd be sitting there pretty cemented in the top 5. So a lot is right sitting there in front of Penn State's hands. And it all starts with the Auburn game, which is definitely going to be a tough test with what they present with running the football. They got a 2-quarterback system, and the old adage, if you got 2 quarterbacks, you got none. But Auburn definitely does a good job of running the football, and running back Tank Bigsby, he took it to Penn State last year, and they'll have to keep him in check this year too.
I love that I love that name, Tank Bigsby. That's a Key and Peele fake name that you would hear on their sketches. So you talked about easy roads. Let's transition now to a team that has another pretty easy road ahead. I think possibly after this game on Saturday, I wouldn't necessarily call this an easy game considering some of the circumstances involved. And that is Pitt, who heads to Kalamazoo. You ever been to Kalamazoo, Andrew?
Can't say I have. No, been to Michigan, the state of Michigan, but not
Yes,
Kalamazoo.
I've also been to Michigan. I will be in Kalamazoo in a couple of days, covering the number 23 Panthers as they seek revenge against the Western Michigan Broncos. Andrew is a guy who, you went to Penn State. You've been living in Happy Valley for a while now. I don't expect you to be a Pitt connoisseur and know everything and anything about this team, but I am intrigued to get your opinion on some stuff. The first thing is the quarterback situation here. With we both have the privilege of covering some unique coaches in the world of college football. Some guys who really like to do things their way, and they have a method behind their madness. And with Narduzzi this week, it's been mum's the word, always mum's the word with injuries, but especially this week, there has been an emphasis on him, any coach, any player. There's no information to be had about the status of Kedon Slovis and Nick Patty. Because when you have one quarterback hurt, that's one thing. But when his backup is possibly hurt as well, create some tense times. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely from the outside looking in. I mean, was able to track that Pitt-Tennessee game a little bit. And I know Pitt got up early with Slovis there at quarterback. And, he gets hurt there for the Panthers, which definitely set them back. And Patty is just, from the outside looking in, seems like not quite the same caliber of quarterback. And that's no disservice to him. He's been part of the program for a long time. But Slovis, the transfer coming in from USC, did a lot of good things in that backyard brawl matchup, which was awesome, by the way, watching from the outside. Him versus JT Daniels. I mean, former teammates. What's not to like about that, right?
Sports writer's dream.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, which, a side note, those rivalry games are awesome.
Yes.
Love seeing those. And Penn State, West
Virginia. It's almost like our two teams we cover should play.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Just an idea. But continue.
It's almost like for 4 years they had some great games, but but no. And sincerely though, it's with the quarterback situation. Slovis, I think, brought a different dimension to that offense, and with Western Michigan, you'd love to sit here and say, well, it doesn't really matter which quarterback, or if they have to go further down the roster, if it's not Slovis, if it's not Patty, you'd love to say that you don't need to worry about that. But last year they had Kenny Pickett, played Western Michigan at home, and lost in that offensive shootout at home, an early season September matchup. And, it just goes to show you that, especially in the current climate of college football with the transfer portal and NIL, it seems like that balance of power is really becoming a real thing. We saw it in the Alabama-Texas game. It's like Texas with Steve Sarkisian. Last year, that was a sub-500 team, and now they're able to retool a little bit and compete with Alabama, because great Alabama players that maybe in the past would sit it out for a few years, then wait and get their turn. They're saying, I'm done. I'm going to another team. I'm going to get playing time. And that's I think that's a key point here. So with going into Western Michigan game to kind of tie things together, it really does matter who's a quarterback for Pitt, because last year is a perfect example of if you're not firing on all cylinders, and if your defense, which I know Pat Narduzzi is big on that man-to-man coverage and sending the pressure, and if you leave your guys out in an island and the other team's got a good quarterback, you could be in for a long day. So if they keep giving chances to that Western Michigan offense, if Slovis isn't good to go, if Patty's not good to go, it could be a very interesting day for you out in Kalamazoo.
And I think it will be. I mean, I have and honestly, even from what I've seen in practice and what they do or don't want me to talk about, I have no idea who's going to be playing at quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be Slovis. I don't know if it's going to be Derek Kyler, the third string quarterback. I don't know if it's going to be someone even further down on the depth chart. I really don't know. But I do think what matters most isn't what Pitt's offense can do. Because I think regardless of even if Slovis does play, I don't think he's at 100%. So I think they're going to try to run the ball. And based off of what we saw Pitt do on the ground last week with Israel Abanikanda, I mean, they ran the ball great. He was the ACC running back of the week. He had a 75-yard touchdown, I think 146 yards on the ground, maybe a little bit more than that if my memory isn't correct. But they're going to be able to run the ball against this team. It's what the defense does. And while their quarterback's not returning, they have Jack Salopek, a Norwin grad, who looked really good against Michigan State, almost led them in the fourth quarter. They were a score away from tying that game. And then he looked really great. He looked great in the second half against Ball State. So they have a very formidable quarterback. And then they return two of their top other players that gashed Pitt left and right last year, and Sean Tyler, the running back, and Corey Crooms, the receiver. I think he had 124 yards through the air against them last year receiving. So they still have playmakers. They're going to run that RPO, and it really comes down to Pitt's defense, which so far has had kind of a tendency to allow the big play, which is going to happen with, like you said, Narduzzi defenses that always bring the house and have that cover 1 or cover 0 coverage all the time. But you can't be making those mistakes against a Western Michigan. If you want to make them against the Tennessee, that's one thing. You know, those are 4-star, 5-star guys you're covering. If you want to do it against West Virginia, who has a quarterback like JT Daniels, I get that too. But these are battles you need to win. You're not getting beaten man-to-man against the MAC team. You shouldn't. And the Pitt defensive backs don't anticipate that happening. They are very motivated based off of how they performed last year. And this whole revenge factor is the main thing that everyone's talking about on their team. I spoke with David Green today, redshirt senior defensive tackle, and I said, you know, is this loss to Western Michigan in the past? You know, have you guys put it behind you? Have you won a conference championship since then? You played in the New Year's Six Bowl. You've been ranked. You played in national TV games in both weeks of the regular season this year. Are you over it? He said, absolutely not. It's still personal. He compared himself to Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. He literally said that. He said it feels like it's personal. And come Saturday, we got something for him. And Eric Hallett, another redshirt senior safety, said something similar. He said, you know, when payback's on the line, you have a little bit more going for you. And that's something that I look at this matchup, and Pitt is very hungry. But at the same time, Western Michigan's hungry. They know they can beat this team. And they know what a win over Pitt can do for them because they played Michigan State tough. They know that they have a team that can compete well in the MAC, and a win over a ranked opponent in their home opener, that could do wonders for their program. So there's a lot on the line here. It should be a very fun matchup, and I'm really excited to cover it. So we'll move on from that one now, and we'll get into our final segment of the day, which goes into some NFL picks, week 2 of the NFL slate. You're watching this on Thursday, hopefully Thursday morning. I hope you just got right out of bed. You went to the Post-Gazette's YouTube channel, brand new, but we're still killing it with subscribers and views. And if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe all button already. But when you woke up in the morning, you thought 2 things. You thought Post-Gazette's got some new YouTube content out, and we got a great Thursday night football matchup. Chiefs, Chargers, that's just kicking off what is a very fun slate in NFL week 2. Andrew, I asked you in preparation for this show to give me a money line pick, a pick against the spread, and a total. And I have those as well. And we're just going to go through them. I'll ask you first. What's your money line pick for this week 2 NFL slate?
Got to go with the Saints. It's Saints Buccaneers, and you know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, Brady's due to go and figure things out against the Saints." But the reality is, 0-4 against the Saints during his time since joining Tampa Bay. The Saints haven't lost to the Bucs since 2018 in the regular season, and you know Jameis Winston, the way he was able to catch fire down the stretch there in the fourth quarter. Now he's got a healthy receiver there, and Michael Thomas. So I look at it as this is going to be a close one. But I think this Buccaneers team, especially on offense, a lot of holes were exposed by a good but not great Dallas Cowboys defense that really, that was only a close game for as long as it was because the defense holds strong for so long. If the offense showed any semblance of a heartbeat from the Cowboys, which once Dak Prescott went out, that definitely took a turn for the worse for them. But I think the Saints team, people want to write them off and say that the division should go to Tampa Bay, but I think this will be a tight one. I think if you're looking for which one of these teams to pick, kind of going money line underdog. I'm going to the Saints.
All right, I got a money line underdog as well, and I'm keeping it for tonight. I'm going with the Chargers. I really like what I saw from LA in their opening week game. I actually watched it with a guy who was a Chargers fan, and he was waiting for the fourth quarter collapse. He told me a funny stat. He said, I've watched this team for my whole life. He said over the last 11 years, there's been 37 games where they started the fourth quarter with a lead and they lost. He said, Noah, that's over 2 seasons of NFL football where my team had a fourth quarter lead and lost the game. And he was waiting for it to happen, but it didn't. And you saw that those additions that they made in the offseason, with Khalil Mack being the most notable, played a big role in that. And you saw that their young coaching staff who showed promise, but also made a little bit of mistakes in crunch time last year, may have learned from that. And you saw that they have a really good quarterback in Justin Herbert. Now the Chiefs, I forget the guy's name, but they got a pretty good quarterback too. But I really do think that this is an opportunity for the Chargers to make a statement that for a division that has just been owned by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid for really as long as the two have been a combination, that maybe the Chargers can step in and say, hey, no. This is a little bit more open of a competition now. You know, we've got some other good players and quarterbacks in this division, but they're going to have to worry about us just like they're going to have to worry about you. So I like the Chargers plus 175 to win outright tonight. Against the spread, I'll just keep it with me. And this will be an interesting one. We had the whole board to pick from, and I went with the Colts -4. And now, Andrew, I know that you're going to pick the opposite here, and that means everyone watching this should definitely go with Andrew's pick based off of how my gambling record is. But I will say this. The Colts looked horrible for 3.5 quarters against the Texans. It's a game they should have won, though. I mean, if you watched that fourth quarter and in overtime, I mean, they cut my guy, Rodrigo, which is sad, you know, probably crying and fogging up those goggles, which is heartbreaking. But nonetheless, I do think that the Colts are a playoff team. I think they are the best team in this division. And I think that, you know, in order to be the best team in this division, you need to beat, you know, bad teams. And I think the Jaguars are a bad team. They don't want to start off 0-2 in their own division. I think to get the job done, and they cover the 4 against Jacksonville. Andrew, tell me why I'm wrong.
The only reason I say you're wrong is 2 words, Trevor Lawrence. And I think that what he showed in week 1 against Washington, and that's a game that you very easily, the same way you talk about Colts-Texans, where the Colts really should have won that game, and completely agree with you, but I would argue the Texans right now are in a worse spot than the Jaguars are. That's a team that might be a little bit further along just based on the pieces that they've got. And I like what I saw from Christian Kirk at wide receiver. I know a lot of people like to give the Jaguars a hard time for the amount of money they gave him in free agency, but pairing him with Trevor Lawrence, the return of Travis Etienne, I got to say there are some good things to see there from the Jaguars. They really gave Washington a run for their money. Also can't discredit the home field advantage. Jaguars host the Colts, so I think this is one where I look at this Jacksonville team and say, hey, you got Lawrence at quarterback, ride him. And if I'm wrong on this one, well, I'm not picking the Jaguars anytime soon. But I like picking quarterbacks in year 2 and think there's a lot of upside there. And Lawrence didn't have a great rookie season. We'll see what he's got in year 2 here.
What home field advantage does Jacksonville play? Does Jackson DeVille coming in on a zip line and maybe landing on Matt Ryan? Is that the home field advantage that you're talking about? Is someone going to drown in the hot tub up in the upper deck? Is that the advantage that, you know, the Jaguars have? I mean, we'll see. I get what you're saying. So
the only home field advantage I'll say is that Indianapolis has to travel because we all know the state of Indiana is in the south. But hey, neither here nor there.
Oh, that very true, very true. All right. So, and then, you know, nothing can go predictably in Florida anyway.
Naturally.
So, all right. So we'll wrap it up now. Give me a total, over or under. You can choose. Give me a total for your NFL Week 2 pick.
Staying local with this one for me, Bay Area guy. I'm going under for 49ers Seahawks. What I saw from the Niners offense, I know a lot of people point to what happened in the rain, and that's the reason for the offensive woes. But that Bears-Niners game, I don't know if you caught any of that. But that
watched.
Yeah, that was dreadful to watch. And the Seahawks, with what they did, great win, beating the Broncos on that Monday night game. Fantastic way to give it back to Russell Wilson. But still, it's Geno Smith at quarterback. You had Geno at quarterback plus Trey Lance. The over-under number for that one is in the low 40s at 42. I think that one's definitely going to hit on the under for that. Trey Lance hasn't shown me anything at quarterback right now that would prove on the opposite. They got a guy who's perfectly competent backing him up in Jimmy G, and Geno Smith at quarterback. It's hard for me to say that him and his offense are going to score more than 20 against the Niners. Give me the under on Niners Seahawks.
I mean, he didn't write back to you, I guess, Andrew. But I like that pick. I'm going to go with an over since you went with an under. And I'm going to go with Browns-Jets over 39.5. And when you think about offenses, you think of these two teams, honestly. But I will say that this is just a strategy of mine. I look for very low totals. 39.5 is low. And I do think, I mean, I saw Wilson practice today. I think Flacco is still going to start. But even if he does, the Browns defense doesn't amaze me by any means. I mean, if Baker Mayfield and Carolina can put up 20-something against them, I think the Jets should be able to do just as much with some of the playmakers that they have. I really like the young running back out of Iowa State, Breece. Is it Hall? I think his name is. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, he showed me a little bit in their week 1 loss against Baltimore. And, that New York's just going to be motivated to not lay another egg. Their coach certainly wrote a whole bunch of checks for him that they certainly need to figure out a way to cash. And as for the Browns go, they're good at running the football. And I think that just with what they have up front and what they have in the backfield is good for at least 21 points right there. I do think this one's going to be close to the total, but I could see a 21-20 final score here, and that will get you just what you need to get the win. So, Andrew, that's all I got for you, my man. Hopefully this wasn't too painful for you, or and you enjoyed yourself. And for everyone that was watching, listening, enjoying this show, however you so choose, be sure to hit that subscribe all button if you haven't already. Follow the Post-Gazette on all of its social media platforms, and head to the website this weekend. I'll have stuff to read. Andrew will have stuff to read. And we have, about 30,000 people who cover the Pittsburgh Steelers for this site as well. They'll have stuff to read about as well. So go ahead, keep checking out all of our content, and we'll see you next week here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel.